So we've talked a little bit about the relationship between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary. We said that the posterior pituitary does not produce its own hormones, but it stores two of the many hormones produced by the hypothalamus. The two hormones are oxytocin and ADH, so I'll cover those today. Again, this is not meant to be like an all-inclusive, okay? But this is the material that I generally require my students to know, so it's a great review for them, and again, a lot of you out there are interested in this type of information. So, let's go over the first one, ADH. What does it stand for? It's antidiuretic hormone. First off, we have to understand what diuresis is. Diuresis is not urination, that's called micturition. Diuresis is the actual formation of urine. So we can either antidiurese, prevent that formation, or diurese, which is to increase that formation of urine, okay? So antidiuretic hormone prevents the formation of urine. Why would we ever want to prevent the formation of urine? This is a way to get toxins and waste products out of the body, right? Well, we want to do that in a number of cases, okay? But a key thing that we can think about is, what if you have dehydration? Wouldn't we produce ADH? Well, your blood is made up of primarily water, so your plasma. So again, if you're dehydrating, you're actually losing blood volume. And we could talk about this at another time, but when you lose blood volume, you lose blood pressure, right? Because volume creates pressure. Think about putting water in a balloon, right? The more volume, the more pressure inside. And so it can become very dangerous. So this antidiuretic hormone is not just to affect the urinary system, but it's actually to affect the urinary system to affect the cardiovascular system and blood pressures and volumes and things of this nature. So very, very important hormone. So antidiuretic hormone is going to prevent diuresis, which means there's two environments when we talk, at least when I talk about this, I talk about the two environments. It's what goes into the urine and what doesn't. What doesn't is in the blood. So it's either the environment of the blood plasma or the urine. And so if we're diuresing, then we're losing that fluid into the urine, which we might want to do as long as the volume is sufficient. And so then we wouldn't produce ADH, and we would block ADH secretion at that point. And if we want to preserve water in the blood or volume of the blood, then we want to release this antidiuretic hormone to do just that. Okay, so that's what it does. Now, antidiuretic hormone or ADH is also known as vasopressin, by the way. It's another name for it. That hormone is produced by the hypothalamus. It gets stored in the posterior pituitary when the posterior pituitary needs to release it, or the body needs it. The hypothalamus tells the posterior pituitary neurologically, okay, go ahead and release it. It does so, okay? And so, and again, that's what's going to happen. It's going to prevent diuresis, so we're going to preserve fluid in the blood and preserve volume. And there's a cascade that happens that I won't be covering in this particular post, okay? The renin-angiotensin system, but we'll talk about that at some point. Now, let's talk about the second hormone, oxytocin. Again, there's a lot of research on this, and this is ongoing research. So there's some things that are still unclear about oxytocin. What we know is that oxytocin is important for the letdown reflex, which is the ejection of milk during breastfeeding. Okay, so it's not the production of milk, that's prolactin, but this is the ejection of milk, very important for that. We also know that it is super important for uterine contractions. And so, during the end of pregnancy, oxytocin is responsible for increasing those uterine contractions, and there's this positive feedback cycle. And so those are some really, really important key things. Well, we also know that oxytocin plays a role in sexual arousal and response. And so, and that's where it gets a little less clear as far as the function. But if you've heard of this before, oxytocin is known as the cuddle hormone. And they've done a lot of research on this. I believe most of it, if not all of it, it was in animal studies. The animal studies are the ones that I've seen. And those studies talk about, and I do think that they are valid, and there may be some human studies on there. I've got to do a little bit more extensive research on it. But basically, this hormone, this cuddle hormone, it not only makes you want to, not only gives you this good feeling. So, and by the way, this gets produced not just from sex. It does get produced from sex, but it also gets produced from physical affection in a number of different ways. And so I believe even hugging can cause this response where you produce oxytocin. Again, it's kind of this feel-good hormone. It also, though, what's really interesting is it increases trust in the partner, okay? And so I know they've explored this before. I don't think it works this way, They've got little oxytocin sprays and things like that to try and increase trust and feelings of affection towards your partner. I don't think they particularly work. It's probably because there's a lot more to the mechanisms going on in the human body than just this hormone being secreted. And I'm sure there's a balance of a number of other hormones and neurotransmitters that are playing a role there. Anyway, without going down a bunny trail of that, it's interesting. It's something that we need more research on. And if you have any questions, let me know. We've got oxytocin, ADH, both produced by the hypothalamus, both stored and released by the posterior pituitary when we need them. The hypothalamus tells the posterior pituitary to do so. Again, the posterior pituitary is also called the neurohypophysis. Just a little fun fact in case you missed my other video on it. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. Stay strong. I'll see you next time.